So the question was posed, is you can't manage it if you can't measure it true for Agile? And our presentation today will explore that. We'll talk about the metrics that drive behavior, and in the Agile process, team members undergo significant behavioral changes, so we'll talk about that. Today we have our presenters are Sanjeev Augustine, President of Lightspeed. He is an industry-leading Agile and Lean expert. Sanjeev is a co-founder and board member of the Agile Project Leadership Network, known as APLN. He is also the author of several publications in the book Managing Agile Projects. He is the founder and moderator of the Yahoo Agile Project Management Discussion Group, and he also has more information about him at sanjeevaugustine.com. We also have Roland Cuellar, Vice President of Lightspeed. Roland has years of Agile project management and lead expertise experience. He is a leader in helping enterprise-level clients adopt the use of Agile and Lean in their organizations. Roland has prior experience leading large software development projects for IBM, Lockheed Martin, and DHL, and is a certified Scrum Master and a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. And with that, I will turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, Leanne, for that introduction, and hello everyone out there in the internet land. This is Sanjeev Augustine here, and I'll be joined in this webinar by Roland Cuellar, and we'll go back and forth in our presentation today. I want to just sort of give you an idea of what we will be covering today, and if you would take your attention to the agenda slide, we have three big chunks. One is we'd like to start with a conceptual background, some theory, some discussion as far as foundational thinking, if you will, about how to approach metrics. And the title for our presentation, of course, is Agile Metrics for Senior Managers and Executives who tend to have a fondness for metrics. So we want to offer not only some advice based on our past experience, but also some words of caution over here. The other second piece that we'll get into right after that is what we refer to as an Agile Balance Scorecard. Roland will introduce the notion of the traditional balance scorecard, and then we'll talk about a modification of this scorecard for Agile projects and programs and portfolios. We'll talk about some specific examples, 2, 3, or actually 4 specific metrics that we believe are useful. And then we'll also revisit the scorecard at the end to explain some of the other ways that it could be used. And then, as Leanne mentioned, you do have the opportunity to ask questions all through, but we'll have about 10 or 15 minutes at the end for some formal Q&A. And with that, I'd like to jump straight into the first part of our presentation today, and that is the conceptual background. And I want to talk about just some thinking about defining key metrics. The first thing that I'd like to discuss over here is this, something that's known in management theory or management circles as the Hawthorne effect. Many of you out there already have a background in general management and are probably aware that this term comes from Western Electric. Western Electric, of course, being the company which is probably now doesn't exist, but very powerful, very big, and had a strong bureaucracy and very strong management practices in the 1900s. They ran a series of experiments relating to measurement of productivity, worker productivity. And what is interesting about the Hawthorne effect, as it came to be called by management scientists afterwards, was that they actually measured things like background lighting, work factors, placements, that sort of thing in this Hawthorne plant in Chicago. And one of the things that they found was that when they first looked at background lighting or ambient lighting, for example, and they raised the lighting, they found that there was a related increase in productivity. And they thought, oh wow, this is cool. If we start raising the lighting, for example, maybe our worker productivity will go up. The next thing they did was, to balance the experiment, was that they lowered the lighting. And guess what happened over there? Productivity went up. Somewhat counterintuitive over there. But so the conclusion that they drew from that was that once we start measuring something, in the Hawthorne experiments, it was worker lighting, for example, ambient lighting, for example, productivity went up no matter whether they raised the lighting or lowered the lighting. And so it was interesting that the conclusion that they drew from that was that we affect what we measure. So we got to choose these, the metrics very carefully and understand that there are going to be consequences and ramifications that we might understand, and sometimes consequences that we might not understand and anticipate. So the other piece of advice that we like to take into consideration when we're looking at metrics, especially when we apply it to Agile teams, comes from Peter Drucker, the renowned management scientist. And Peter Drucker, as you might know, drew the distinction. He's the first person to draw this distinction between knowledge work and what we now call industrial work, or the things that we don't consider to be creative or professional work. And Peter Drucker coined the term knowledge worker a number of years ago, and he also said that the way knowledge work and knowledge workers need to be measured is very different from non-knowledge work. And the advice that Peter Drucker said, that anytime we consider measures of quality or productivity or things like this, we have to ask these three questions. What is our business? Who is our customer? What does our customer consider valuable? And then any measures or metrics or measures of quality, for example, need to flow from these above three questions. And Drucker actually indicates and advises that the metrics such that they are, as they're defined, should be actually measured by the knowledge workers themselves, by the teams themselves. So with that basis, I'd like to pass it over to Roland, and he's going to talk a little bit about metrics as indicators or metric frameworks.
Okay, thanks, Sanjeev. And we've got a picture here on the right-hand side of the screen of our esteemed Federal Reserve Chairman in the U.S., Ben Bernanke. And the Federal Reserve Chairman is primarily interested in two high-level, business metrics or economic drivers, I'll say, inflation and GDP. And the Federal Reserve Bank and the chairman and governor spend a lot of time trying to find a balance between growth of GDP and keeping inflation under control. However, they need to, in order to get a forward view into what's going to happen in the next quarter or the next year, they'll measure down from that and look at things like housing starts and durable goods orders and producer price index and consumer price index, et cetera, not necessarily because they care about those things in and of themselves, but those give them leading indicators into what might happen with respect to inflation and GDP in the future. And so what I've got here on this page are really four sort of little frameworks, if you will, that you might think about as you try to organize your metric system. The first is lagging indicators. These are our common business metrics such as revenue and profit and earnings per share and market share and things of that nature. And we all need to measure those, of course. The only problem is that they tend to be lagging indicators. They often tell us what happened in the last financial period and do not always give us a good forward indication of what's going to happen in the future. Now, managers who are leading organizations and teams and programs need leading indicators as well so that they can get a forward view into what might happen so that they can take corrective action as necessary. And so you'll need to look for leading indicators of performance as well. In the same way that Ben Bernanke might look at housing starts and durable goods, you'll need to look for leading indicators in your programs and projects and in your industry. A third way of sort of organizing our metrics is around effectiveness. Measures of effectiveness measure, did we meet our business goals with this project? Did we acquire the customers that we thought we were going to acquire by developing this new product? Did we retain customers as we thought we would? Did we lower internal costs as we thought we would with the projects that we undertook, et cetera? So were our solutions effective in meeting our business goals? And then finally, efficiency metrics. And those are measures of, did we utilize our resources as efficiently as we could have in terms of budget and schedule, use of resources, et cetera. And so as you develop your own internal metrics, think about these four facets of measurement, if you will. What are our lagging business indicators? What are our leading indicators that will give us an early insight into whether we're going to meet our targets? What are our targets in terms of effectiveness, and how will we measure whether our projects actually achieve their goals? And finally, how will we measure efficiency in the use of our constrained resources? I want to bring up now I discussed 4 ways of thinking about metrics so far, and I'm going to add a 5th one now. Many of you are probably familiar with the balanced scorecard concept. Robert Kaplan and David Norton introduced those in 1992 as a strategy development, strategy management framework, and that has become very popular and has grown significantly in usage throughout the world with a lot of tools and papers and books and whatnot, and very commonly utilized framework for looking at the different parts of the organization or different facets of the organization, if you will. Really centered around these 4, what I'll call success factors. Financial success in terms of cost per unit or revenues or profits or project savings. Customer success factors, customer acquisition, customer retention, net promoter scores and quality issues. Internal business processes. What are our cycle times and our cost per units and volumes and our schedule performance in terms of delivery. And then finally, internally, looking at our own people, what are our innovation and learning strategies and metrics in terms of lessons learned, dollars spent on training per employee, what's our employee turnover and revenue from new product development, etc. And so what Sanjeev and I have been doing is trying to put these different frameworks together, because I think that they all bring something to the table in terms of how to view metrics. We have leading and lagging indicators, which are very important, measures of effectiveness and efficiency, which are also very important, and then these different facets of the organization that all need to be taken into account. And so what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Sanjeev, who's going to talk about how we're putting these items together to produce, if you will, an agile balanced scorecard that takes these 5 viewpoints into account, and with special emphasis on agile software development.
Okay, thanks, Roland. And I'd like to request Leanne, maybe this is a good time for a first poll question. We actually have 2 poll questions, and I just want to get a sense of what some of the audience out there is thinking. So I'd like to ask Leanne to put up a first poll question while I jump to the next slide. Please respond, and we should be able to tabulate the results momentarily. Okay, excellent. So we have some of the results over there, and it's interesting that we're about even over there in terms of people who are in organizations that are using Agile metrics versus people who are not using Agile metrics. So it's just kind of interesting of this evenly split over there. Yeah, I think sometimes metrics get a bad rap, and we'll talk about a little bit of that as well as to how to position them so that they don't take things awry. So I want to jump to our next slide, which is introducing this notion of an Agile balanced scorecard. Now, the balanced scorecard, as Roland mentioned, is a holistic sort of view into organizations and the enterprise at large. And one of the things we like to do with our clients, and we have a few clients who are using this Agile balanced scorecard, is to apply the same thinking, not necessarily the same elements of the standard balanced scorecard. But here's an example. This is a sample Agile balanced scorecard where we attempt to get a holistic view for a senior manager or an executive who's in charge of Agile adoption or who's managing a portfolio of Agile projects and is interested in getting a cross-functional view or an enterprise view of everything that's there in the Agile portfolio. So our elements over here are product, team, financial, and schedule. And I'll talk about some of the other ones that are not in bold under the items over here that you're seeing over here. But the next thing I want to do is to, under each of these 4 categories, in detail review business value delivered, for example, on the product, customer and associate satisfaction on the team, NPV under financial and earned value for Agile under schedule as example metrics under this Agile Balance Scorecard. But there you have it. This is a sample Agile scorecard that is being used in some of the enterprise adoptions with which we work. And here are some of the elements: product, team, financial, and schedule. So let's take a look at the first one. With the product, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get a sense of what is in the product backlog. What are the things that have been delivered? What are the things that are in the backlog that are yet to be delivered? And here you have one example, the first example, which is a measure of business value delivered. So what we've done over here is that we've taken a typical Agile backlog, the product backlog, which has user stories at the very bottom, and then we aggregate those user stories, as is typically done, into features. And then here we call them goals, but these are equivalent to epics or high-level features. And then what we've done is we tried to quantify each user story and then aggregate that quantification up to the goal level. So you see an example over here where we start off with a goal for registration process. And the goal is to actually improve the speed of the registration process over here for a software system. So we say the fast account registration process represents 40% of our business case. And then we have two high-level features or high-level user stories that are under that particular goal: a user account registration and an account processing. And those are 70% and 30% each in terms of the value of the fast account registration process. And then for the user account registration, as we keep drilling down, we have two user stories. As a user, I can enter personal information, which is about 40% of the value. And then as a user, I can enter billing information, which is 60% of the business value. And then for the account processing feature, we have a single user story, which represents 100% of the value. As an account processor, I can activate a user account. And then let's say we finish, one user story is finished. It's been completed. It's been unit tested. It's been user acceptance tested. It's been signed off on. And this one is the one in green. It says, as a user, I can enter billing information. Well, that was 60% of the user story value. And then as we aggregate that up, it turns out that 0.6 times 0.7 times the 40% for the account user process in general gives us a business value delivered of 16.8%. So this is a simple and simple yet powerful way of quantifying some of the business value that's been delivered. So very simply, we take the stories that are in the product backlog, and then we assign certain percentages of value to those, and then we just aggregate those. So this is one simple way of looking into business value delivered. With that, I want to jump into the second element as an example of our Agile Balance Scorecard, and that's the team view of the Agile Balance Scorecard. And I want to talk about customer satisfaction. We talk about customer and associate satisfaction, but here is an example. This is probably not from our software development industry, but it's one that's probably familiar to many of us because we all generally drive some sort of vehicle or the other. I live in the Washington, D.C. area, and there is a Honda dealership over here that's called Landmark Honda. I should mention that I don't work for Landmark Honda, neither am I getting any kickbacks for mentioning them. I'm just a very satisfied customer, so I'm throwing them into the presentation today. But one of the things that we did a couple of years ago was to buy a Honda Odyssey, which is a minivan. And when I took the new vehicle for its first service, I was kind of surprised to see this survey form on the right-hand side. It's reproduced in part. And there's a survey about pass, fail, excellent, and there was a scoring system by which I was then requested to rank the effectiveness or my satisfaction with the service of the performance of the service personnel. And there was a question that kind of struck me over there, and it said that, as you see at the bottom of the screen, and it refers to the questions being asked on the survey. It says, although some of them seem to rate our entire operation, in fact, they all rate my personal performance, and the scores become part of my permanent record. And to me, this is a very simple but effective way of measuring customer satisfaction, right to the customer, and then taking the feedback loop right to the individual person. Now, we could, of course, apply this to a team rather than a person, and then rate customer satisfaction to the delivery of business value from a particular Agile team. Now, an instantiation of this that I want to mention over here is something that's known out in the industry as the Net Promoter Score. Now, the Net Promoter Score is, again, one of the widely used metrics in the industry, and it bases the satisfaction of a customer on on the answer to a single question. And the answer to the single question, or the single question is, how likely are you to recommend this product or service that's being delivered to a colleague or a friend? And the premise is that if we don't like something, we're not going to recommend it to our friends and colleagues because we're putting our personal reputations on the line. And then what the Net Promoter Score framework does is that it takes the answers and it tabulates them on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being not at all likely and 10 being extremely likely. And then basically we have a simple framework that says anybody who answers 9 or 10 is a promoter. And people who answer 7 or 8 on that scale are passives. They're not promoters and they're not detractors. And anybody who answers 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, 5, or 6, or 7, or 8, 0 to 6 are detractors. So 0 to 6 detractors, 7 and 8 passives, and 9 and 10 promoters. And then the Net Promoter Score is a simple calculation which is a percentage of the promoters minus the percentage of detractors, and it comes out to a single number. And just by putting a simple survey together and asking this question as one of the questions of the survey, how likely are you to recommend our product or service to a friend or colleague, we can get a very unique and powerful metric of the Net Promoter Score. So here's a very simple and very powerful example of a customer satisfaction metric that has been implemented not only in our industry, but industry-wide. So I want to pass over to Roland, who's now going to talk about a metric in the financial category, which is net present value.
Before I jump to that, I wanted to just piggyback on what Sanjeev was mentioning. You can use this Net Promoter Score both externally with external customers and users of your products and services, but you could also use it internally to poll your internal business partners and find out how likely they are to recommend your Agile process or your teams to their business partner peers and get a view for how well the IT organization is serving the internal business partners of the company. So with that, I want to move over to net present value. Just to step back for one moment, we are walking through the balance scorecard, our Agile balance scorecard, if you will, and taking individual metrics from each of the 4 categories and highlighting them in detail. These aren't the metrics necessarily that you would need to use or have to use, but they are just examples of metrics that you could use should you choose to develop your own Agile balance scorecard. So this next measure, net present value, I'm going to say is a measure of financial effectiveness. So it's how effective are we utilizing our capital to create positive business value for the firm as measured by investment performance. So net present value is a very common financial measure of investment performance, and you'll be able to find more details about it in any book on finance. I'm not going to belabor this equation too much. I do want to say that it is sort of a measure of risk-reward trade-off, where risk is our cost of capital, as measured by that interest rate R in the denominator of the equation there, raised to the power of T. The idea here is that we're going to put time value to money, and that means that $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow, because you could take the dollars you earn today and invest them and have more money in the future. So you want to accelerate cash into the firm, and you want to decelerate or slow down cash leaving the firm, and that will produce the greatest net present value, or, if you will, investment performance. Now, this plays very well into the Agile world, and what I have seen is that the firms that use NPV as a metric tend to be able to leverage Agile processes effectively, because NPV says if we can get cash coming in sooner and delay some of our expenditures, we will have outstanding investment performance that adds value to the stock of the company. So how do we do that with Agile? We would do that by releasing our products sooner, having smaller releases that get some value out into the community, be they new revenue or new customers or cost savings. That's going to accelerate our cash coming into the firm. And we're going to delay the production of features and requirements that have low value off into the future, and maybe delay the release of those, or perhaps even never release those. And by doing those two things, which Agile is very good at, you will achieve very positive, potentially, net present value scores, which will look good on your scorecards. And so what I want to say is that net present value can help to drive Agile adoption in your firms. If you take it on as a measure, teams that are using Agile and releasing sooner and delaying the development of low priority requirements will tend to perform better than their peers who are not using Agile. And so it might be a strategic metric that you can use to help drive Agile adoption in your firms. To get back to the leading versus lagging indicators, you can use this one either way. Lagging is a little bit easier. You can look at the end of the project, see how much money you spent, look at the revenues that have come in from it, and tell whether or not you had a positive net present value. Using it as a leading indicator is a little harder, and what you would do there is to measure the assumptions that went into this financial model. When you put your net present value model together, you assume certain cash expenditures and certain timing of those. You assume certain revenues or cost savings and times associated with those. And you can take those assumptions and measure them periodically throughout the project and see whether you're still on track. And that will lead you to some leading indicators of whether or not this project or program is going to have the financial performance that you thought it would. Okay? Next one I want to talk about is a schedule metric called earned value. I'm calling earned value for Agile. This is taken from a paper. The authors are down at the bottom, Suleiman, Barton, and Blackburn. And it's an excellent paper. I think you can probably find it on the web. And a lot of us in the Agile community are used to seeing burn-down charts that show whether you're ahead of schedule or behind schedule. The problem, I love burn-down charts. The problem with them is it's difficult to quantify. If you're off track, how do you know how much you're off track and whether you have a problem or not? What this earned value for Agile does is attempt to calculate and quantify how far off you are in terms of schedule, for example, in terms of plan. And so this is a sort of a schedule efficiency leading indicator metric. So leading indicator of whether we're going to be on time or not. And the way it works is this. Suppose there are 10 iterations. We've got 10 iterations planned for our project. And suppose we're on iteration number 4 right now. That means that we're 40% done with the project from a schedule standpoint. Okay? So that's the planned percent complete, PPC, planned percent complete. We're currently on iteration number 4 out of a total of 10 iterations, and so our planned percent complete is 40%. Let's assume that we have 1,000 units of work to do in this project. Maybe it's 1,000 user story points, or 1,000 labor hours, or 1,000 days, or whatever your unit is, doesn't really matter. Let's say there are 1,000 units of work to be done in this project, and to date we've delivered 300 units of work. So we've points delivered is 300, total points is 1,000, and so our actual percent complete is 30%. Now our planned percent complete was 40% because we're on iteration 4 of 10, but we've only delivered 30% of our points, and that means we have a 10% schedule variance. Okay? And that starts to give you an ability to quantify how far off schedule you are. And it's pretty simple to employ this particular metric. All you need to know is the total number of metrics, the total number of iterations, what iteration you're on, the total number of points in the backlog, and how many have been delivered, and you can start to quantify how far ahead or behind schedule you are. Now from these two basic earned value equations, PPC and APC, you can start then to develop other of the traditional earned value metrics, the planned value, the earned value, the cost performance index, and schedule performance index, etc. I'm not going to go into all those in detail. They're widely written about. There's a ton of information out there. And I'll leave it to you to look into those in more detail should you be interested in them. But those first two, I think that all of us can probably use, probably to some advantage, to start to quantify our schedule slippage if we have it, or if we're ahead of schedule, hopefully, how far ahead we are of schedule with PPC and APC. Okay? Once again, I said those are measures of schedule efficiency and leading indicators of those. And I want to talk about some other leading indicators to use, and I've got up here on the upper right-hand side to use these with caution. At this level of metrics on this page, and this is just sort of a sample of a whole bunch of things you could measure, you're starting to measure pretty low down into the process, if you will, and you just need to be careful with that, because that can sometimes lead to gaming and strange behavior and people trying to hit these numbers as opposed to hit the higher level business numbers that you're really after. Okay? So here are some things that you could measure and that we have measured in different instances, usually with cause. There's usually some reason why we're measuring these things. And with all of these, I just want to say that the idea behind all of these particular leading indicators is that if we follow the Agile process, then maybe it might actually work. And what a lot of these measures are measures to see that are we following the process. And so these, in effect, you might think of as process QA metrics. Okay? Change in velocity. Is the team's velocity changing, from one iteration to the next? That's going to give you an indication that people are getting pulled off of their teams, their priorities are constantly changing, they're trying to juggle too many simultaneous projects, and they have no consistency in their delivery, and therefore that's going to be a leading indicator that you're not going to be able to meet your schedules because there's no stability in the team velocity. Changes in team capacity from one iteration to the next. If you measure the number of hours that the team has available to it from one iteration to the next and see that varying widely, that's also going to give you an indication that you're going to have schedule issues because people are getting pulled off, or people are quitting, or maybe people are joining the team, and that also has sometimes negative productivity impacts. And so I often measure team capacity from one iteration to the next. Product owner time with the team. Is the team getting enough time with the product owner or the product owner's proxies so that they have a firm handle on the requirements? If the teams and the product owners or the business analysts aren't spending enough time together, that's going to be a leading indicator to me that we're going to have issues in terms of quality and defects and things of that nature. Team co-location time. Are the teams spending time together? Agile very much asks that we spend time together in order to synchronize our activities, make sure we all have a common understanding of what we're doing, common goals, and that we're working together. And if teams aren't working together, you can get an early indication that things may not be going as well as they seem. Growth in the backlog is another, or things being added to the backlog faster than we're being able to deliver them, and that'll give us an indication from an early indication into schedule performance. And defect generation. How fast are we generating defects? How fast are we resolving defects? And then finally, this sort of process QA checklist. Are stand-ups happening? Are end of iteration demos happening? Are we doing our retrospectives? Is software being delivered in every sprint? And is testing occurring? All these, if you look at them, will give you leading indications of quality and effectiveness of the team. However, like I said, they are getting pretty detailed, and some folks might balk a little bit at being measured to some of these levels, so you might want to use these with some caution. With that, I'm going to turn back over to Sanjeev now.
Okay. So thanks, Roland, and I actually want to echo that once again. I think I've said it for the third time, so maybe it's starting to sink into at least my brain. But there are a couple of guiding points, or sort of just advice, if you will. And as Roland mentioned, use these metrics with caution. The other thing I want to mention is that you should stick to just a couple of metrics. Don't get too detailed. So there's a tendency, especially if you're mathematically inclined or analytically inclined, there's a tendency to get carried away and just put a whole slew of metrics together on some sort of control plan. And I would really caution against that. Agile is simple for a reason, and therefore Agile metrics should be simple for a reason. Mary Poppendick has some great advice. She says, measure up, measure at the highest level possible, and just measure a few things. So just with that in mind, revisiting our Agile Balance scorecard, I would advise putting no more than 1 or 2 in each of these categories: the product, the team, the financial, and the schedule. We've given some examples. You would certainly need to pick the examples that make sense in your organization. But again, reiterating and underlining the advice that Roland gave, and that is to measure up and just measure a few things. The other thing I just want to underscore is that pay attention to the leading indicators. A lot of times metrics can tend to look backwards. It's kind of a rear view mirror, if you will. So make sure you're picking leading indicators that will allow sort of a forward-looking measurement and oversight, if you will. And then the other final point of advice I would offer is that as much as possible, focus the the metrics and the measurements on business outcomes. So don't look inward that much, but try and use things like business value, customer satisfaction, financial metrics. These are all things that look outward and don't necessarily give us the IT-specific metrics that we think are less important. So those are the 3 points of advice. Just a few metrics, pay attention to the leading indicators, and then make sure you have lots of business outcome measurements, if you will. Just quickly, to wrap this discussion up, I want to talk about some of the other things that we've used as this sample over here. We talked about business value delivered under product. The remaining feature backlog is the value, the business value of everything that's remaining. Quality, to make sure that this is product quality. An example of a quality metric would be percentage of automated test coverage. This is something that perhaps would give us a leading indicator, not so much the measurement of quality after the fact, but maybe a percentage of automated test coverage would be a leading indicator that would then give us an indication of what our product quality is. Under team, we have iteration velocity variance. This is the jumping up or down from iteration to iteration of velocity, the change in velocity that Roland mentioned. It's we again here. This is one that needs to be approached with extreme caution. Agile enthusiasts and Agile evangelists will remind us that iteration velocity is team specific and cannot be applied across an enterprise from just from team to team. So we like to say that let's examine the variance rather than the velocity itself, and that will tell us a story from team to team, not necessarily the velocity itself, which we agree is a team-specific or team-dependent metric. Audit pass rate, there are some audit controls over there. What's the pass rate of regarding the audit controls? That's a team metric that the team can take and own and really improve on. Other financial metrics, cost savings. We're either going after cost savings or we're going after revenue generation, revenue enhancement. So let's get some specific metrics over there. That's something that's very common and can be easily put in place and very objectively measured. Dollars per release. Now this goes after, what's the value of the things that we're putting out there. So not only are we doing the percentage of what we're doing in terms of business value, but let's look at in profit-oriented enterprises, what's the financial value in terms of dollars or rupees or pounds or euros, just to make sure that we're internationalizing this. Dollars per release, I think, will be is a good one. And then a couple under schedule. Under the schedule part of this balanced scorecard, release burn down. This is typically measured and is a good way to keep track of what's happening and what's remaining in the backlog. And then one that gives us a sort of a time to market metric is the days per release. How long does it take us to get a particular software release together? Now we're balancing that with what's actually getting released. So we're not just sort of myopically looking just at how long, how quickly we're releasing to production. In terms of days per release, but the reason we have this balanced scorecard is that we're also looking at what's getting delivered, and we're also then measuring the financial value of that. So you see here how we're trying to holistically approach this, if you will, not just sub-optimizing in a sub-optimized fashion, going after just days per release, but also looking at how much it costs to make that release in terms of dollars per release, and then also looking at the business value delivered across releases. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. I'm going to request that Leanne run the second polling question right now, and maybe that will lead us into our Q&A session.
Excellent. Thank you so much, both of you. It was a great presentation. So yes, we do have a few questions, but want to give people a couple minutes or a minute or so to answer the polling question. And while we're doing that, the first question we have is, how can you avoid people gaming the metric system?
So I think that's a great question, and it's something to keep in mind in terms of this is probably the number one objection that that people will have to using metrics at all, certainly within an Agile context, because metrics can always be gamed, and we are definitely not of the opinion that you can bolt that down or stop people from gaming the system. If there's a system, people will find ways to game it. The only thing we would say is that just as we do things adaptively in terms of product delivery and process improvement, we take the same approach to the development of a metric system. So those of you who are familiar with Lean and Lean Six Sigma, will know what will be familiar with a control plan, a process control plan. So if you approach this metrics as a control plan and understand that These are some points that need to be watched. The metrics are simply some points that need to be watched and need to be improved as we go along. So these are not, we don't lock these things down and say, this is the way it's going to be, and therefore, that these are set in stone, but we also adaptively look at the effect of the metrics and hopefully converge on an optimal set of metrics like this balanced scorecard as we progress.
And I'd like to add to that, whenever I see gaming of metrics, I can usually say that it's usually a problem with measuring a little bit too low. And so, for instance, if you measure team velocity as an example, as a key metric, all the teams have to do in order to make their velocity go up is to overestimate every piece of work that comes in, and now their velocity will shoot up, while in fact they're delivering no more than they were before. And so that's an example of probably measuring a little too low and leaving it wide open for the team to manipulate that. And so what I would do is, in those cases where you think that gaming might be happening or could happen, is to measure up. And in that case, you're going to measure, did we deliver on our commitments at the time that we said we were going to deliver? That is a higher level metric that is a little harder to game than, say something down low like velocity.
So we have a question over here, and that is, can you clarify what was meant by measure up? Yes, thanks for asking that question. Sometimes we tend to throw these terms around, and thanks for making sure that we clarify that. By measuring up, we mean measure the highest possible level. So don't get into the weeds. Don't start drilling into every single metric. Rowan showed a whole bunch of leading indicators that could be used. Our preference is to measure the highest level possible. Don't get into lines of code or that something that adds into the weeds is that. But look at things like customer satisfaction, something up time, cycle time, lead time, things that are at a system level or a product level or a team level, rather than drilling into lower level metrics. So measure up means measure higher up, at looking at higher level metrics, look at business metrics, and measure only a few things.
And so, and to balance that out, I would just add that when I measure low-level things like velocity and time with the product owner and team co-location time and that kind of stuff, it's for a reason. And that's because I've probably already seeing some problems or issues, or I have concerns, and I want to maybe take some measures of those things so that I can find out what the problem is and how we're going to address it. And sometimes I have theories as to why team performance might be higher or lower than it should be, and in which case I might drill down to lower level metrics such as those. But I wouldn't start with all of those low level metrics, so they'll probably get you in trouble.
There's another question over here. Does the product owner help define business value when features and user stories are being defined? Absolutely. That's by definition the product owner's job to not only create the features and the user stories, but also to prioritize them and by way of what we're suggesting or recommending, to also define the business value, the percentage of business value delivered, and how the business value kind of is spread across the product backlog in terms of this user stories. So yes, that should be led by the product owner or a representative of the business. Okay. Let's see. Do we have any other questions? I'm looking down. Roland, you want to take this?
Let me just take a look at this one. In an enterprise, team velocity can and should vary, but should each team have a consistent estimating methodology? If each team is applying story points consistently, it removes a doubt for senior management. That has been a difficult issue in pretty much every organization I've worked with, and some organizations that I've worked with who have been doing Agile for a while are trying to put some standardization around that for precisely that reason. I would say early on in the Agile adoption phases, teams are going to have their own ways of estimating probably. The estimates are probably going to vary widely from team to team, and velocity is going to vary widely from team to team because estimates vary. And so some teams are going to have different scales. Some teams are going to estimate between your user stories between 1 and 10 points, and another team might measure their user stories between 1 and 100 points. And so obviously one team is going to be delivering 50 points or per iteration, and another team is going to be delivering 10. And that doesn't mean they're doing more or less work, but it does make it hard to present a consistent picture to upper level management who sees these wildly different numbers. There are mathematical ways that you could scale those so that they're all on the same scale, Or as you get further into the adoption, you could ask that the teams at least all work off of the same scale. Maybe we're all going to measure our user stories as, between 1 and 20 points or something like that, so that at least the numbers are in the same ranges. But this can and has been a difficult area, and I don't know that there's a clear solution to it just yet. Sanjeev, any ideas on that?
Yeah, the only comment I would make is that I definitely fall on the side of the the Agile enthusiasts in this respect, because the team velocity and the estimates are not fungible across teams. So it continues to be an issue, reporting those things up to senior management. But I don't have a solution. The only thing I would add is that, or the only thing I would say is, my position is that there's no way to make estimates fungible across different teams, because capabilities are different across different teams and individuals are different across different teams. So estimates are not fungible across teams.
Yeah, this is one of those cases where I would look from iteration to iteration, look at customer satisfaction. Who's the business partner you're developing for? And instead of measuring the team's velocity, is the product owner and the business partner happy with what they got in this iteration? Did they get what they were going to get, and they're happy with how long it took and how much it costs? That's probably maybe a better indication of team performance than necessarily velocity.
Okay, Roland, there's an NPV question over here. Would you expect your Agile management software to include financial NPV-like reporting?
Agile,
we should punt this one to the version 1.
I don't know if any Agile management software tools necessarily have that functionality built into them. It is definitely built into Microsoft Excel, and even calculators. You get the HP Business Calculator; it can do it as well. A lot of people don't necessarily haven't adopted NPV yet, so I don't know that it's really made it into the tool support set just yet. But you can do it in Excel very easily and have that as an attachment.
I want to quickly go through some of the others because we've got a bunch of the questions here. There's another great question over here. What unit do you recommend for calculating business value? Calculating the dollar value of a feature or user story can be difficult. Absolutely, I feel your pain. Trying to get to an objective measure of business value is very, very difficult. A lot of times, if you're having that difficulty and you're not able to get to a dollar value or some sort of financial value, we'd say just use a relative scale. So something's a high versus a medium or a low or a 4 or 5 point scale, and just make it a relative measure, which again serves to give us things like the percentage of business value delivered without acknowledging that it doesn't solve the problem of giving us a dollar type metric, but it at least helps to give us a holistic view of the delivery of business value across the enterprise.
Yeah, this is a whole science in and of itself, and you can go visit PDMA, the Product Development Management Association, and they've got books, papers, articles, and magazines all about how do we value new product development and different ways of measuring that. Maybe we're trying to achieve a certain increase in new customers, and maybe we would value our software features by their likelihood of driving new customers to our website, or customer retention, or lowering costs, etc. Maybe the implementation of this one feature will drive down the cost that it takes to do some internal business process by 10%, or that the implementation of some other feature will reduce the time it takes to perform some internal business process by 10%. And you can start to use perhaps those kinds of things as ways of measuring business value. But it is admittedly quite difficult.
Another great question over here. If velocity is very consistent and the team, are always making their commitments, I wonder if the team is pushing the envelope enough. Your thoughts? Okay, so this is a great question, right? This is the typical management question. And I would hearken back to the advice given by Peter Drucker. These are knowledge workers that we're talking about. We should create as Agile managers, we should be creating an environment in which our team can be trusted. And if they're not trusted, then that's a different problem. That's a management problem, not so much a metrics problem. But in an Agile management environment, if you're selecting the right people, if we are managing by Agile management and principles, and in keeping with the ethos of the Agile movement, then we have self-disciplined teams. And if we trust our teams to deliver our products and deliver good quality products, then I think we can trust them to to participate and own the metrics. And in terms of gaming the metrics, that's always possible. Smart people can always game the metrics. Smart people can always come up with a velocity that's consistent by either consistently overestimating or consistently underestimating. And I don't know that there's any solution. If the team is being dishonest, then that's a symptom of another problem.
Yeah, and I could add that, this may have, I can see this happening when the teams have no incentive to push. Maybe this is a problem with incentives and how people are compensated. What if they got bonuses for going above and beyond, or if they got a piece of the pie whenever they delivered fantastic business value? Well, then there's an incentive for them to actually do more than specifically what was requested, or to lowball their capacities and their abilities. And so that might be another way of looking at it, is what's their incentive to go above and beyond?
Okay. All right. So, Leanne, how are we doing on time?
I think we should pretty much wrap it up. So I want to thank you both, Sanjeev and Roland. You guys did an excellent job and a great presentation. And just want to turn that over if you guys have some parting words.
Yes. So thanks to everyone out there for attending. Just wanted to say that Roland and I, even though we're based in Washington, D.C., we tend to travel quite a bit. Look at our website, lightspeed.com, LITHESPEED.com, for details. Also, you can look at my personal site, sanjivaugustine.com, SANJIV, Augustine, AUGUSTINE.com, and you'll see some of our schedules. Just upcoming, next week we'll be on the West Coast in the Irvine area, so if any of you are based on the West Coast and want to talk about this in person, we'll be happy to do that. You can always reach us over email. You'll see at the end of the final slide, we'll have our contact information. So thanks once again. We're definitely open to questions. Feel free to contact us either in person or via email in the future.